Ag-amazing day to all. This is your ag-amazing guru, Teacher Dan Rogayan. And welcome to another episode of our Let Review session. So in this episode, we will again answer 10 questions for your professional education as part of your preparation for your upcoming board examination for professional teachers. Samahan ninyo akong muli sa pagsasagot ng mga tanong na to, and I hope you have your paper and pen with you so that it will actually practice, and answering these parallel questions for your board examination for teachers. So let me first share my slide. All right. Okay, sige, let's start. So, of course, my prayer for everyone is that you will all pass the board examination and get that LPT as an addendum to your name. All right, for the first question, which is true when standard deviation is small? A, scores are tightly bunched together. B, the bell curve is relatively flat. C, scores are spread apart. Letter D, scores are toward both extremes. Okay, what is the answer? This is actually assessment of learning, So when we say standard deviation, this is one of the measures of variability na laging kasama o kapartner ng ating mean sa measures of central tendency. So what is the answer? Of course, that is letter A. Scores are tightly bunched together. So when the standard deviation, pag nakita sa board exam, standard deviation is small, okay? Ibig sabihin tightly bunched, magkakalapit yung scores, okay? So kapag naman big or large ang standard deviation, ibig sabihin farther from each other. Ibig sabihin highly dispersed, no? Ibig sabihin mas malalayo siya with respect to the mean. So usually pag a small standard deviation, that actually indicates the homogeneity of the class or of the sample. So for example, nagpa quarterly exam ka and then you actually get the mean and the standard deviation of all the scores of all the students, and you got a small standard deviation, that means the scores are actually tightly bunched or tightly dispersed from one another. Ibig sabihin, homogeneous, halos magkakapareho yung level of performance o level of learning ng iyong mga estudyante. But pag mataas ang standard deviation, it actually speaks of the heterogeneity of the sample. Heterogeneous yung klase mo, medyo magkakalayo yung performance ng iyong mga estudyante. Okay? So pag nakita sa board exam, standard deviation small, tightly bunched, tightly dispersed, closely dispersed, close from one another, so that means homogeneous. Pag large, standard deviation, highly dispersed, from each other, then is heterogeneous. Okay? Ayan. So here you can see a representation of the a low standard deviation curve means that your win rates remain close to the mean average with respect to the mean, and a fat curve means that there is a wider spread of your scores, for example, in the context of your classroom. High standard deviation, more spread sila, wider spread from each other. Okay? Second question, which of the following comprise the trifocalized system of Philippine education? A, basic education, which actually represents DepEd, technical vocational, TESDA, and higher education, CHED. B, early childhood, technical vocational, and basic education. C, elementary, secondary, or high school, and tertiary or college level. Or letter D, Bureau of Alternative Learning System, Department of Education, and Commission on Higher Education. So, which of the following comprise the trifocalized system of Philippine education? What is the answer? Future LPTs? Medyo, confusing. Kung pa-power of elimination tayo, tatanggalin na natin dyan yung B and C, So, pwede na natin piliin yung A or D. So, this actually is being represented, by different agencies in parenthesis. So, Between A and D, what is the answer? Of course, letter A. Basic education, DepEd, technical vocational test, and higher education CHED. Bakit hindi pwede yung letter D? Kasi ALS is actually under the Department of Education. This is one program being implemented by Department of Education as a non-formal education system. And Commission on Higher Education is just fine pero nawawala dito yung TESDA, which is focused on technical vocational education. Letter B, early childhood and basic education, nandyan yan di ba? The um, basic education, kindergarten, and the grade 1 to 10, no, is under basic education, and part of the basic education is of course your early childhood, kaya medyo off na yan. Eto naman, elementary, secondary, or high school, these elementary, secondary, high school, these are under one department. No? Elementary and secondary is of course under Department of Education. Tertiary under college or Commission on Higher Education. At nawawala ulit dito yung TESDA ninyo. So the best answer here is letter A. Basic education would, of course, under the Department of Education. TESDA is focused on technical vocational courses. Then higher education is focused on the degree programs in whether in private HEI or higher education institution or state universities or colleges or SUCs or even local universities and colleges or LUCs. Okay? So basically, these three comprises our trifocalized system of education. We have the Department of Education or Kagawaran ng Edukasyon, which is of course governed by the Republic Act 9155. Then of course we have TESDA, which was created under Republic Act 7796, no? Technical Education Skills Development Authority, no? So pag tinanong anong ibig sabihin ng TESDA, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. While for Commission on Higher Education, it was actually created under Republic Act 7722 in 1994, which will actually supervise the collegiate or tertiary level in the country. So sige, mag-drill nga lang tayo ng konti, no? Anong tawag natin sa head ng Department of Education? Of course, we call that as secretary. Kaya siya tinatawag na DepEd Secretary. Ngayong 2022, no, in the new administration of President Bongbong Marcos, no, the current Secretary of Department of Education is the Vice President. So, Honorable Vice President Sara Z. Duterte, the Vice President Secretary of DepEd. Okay? Then, for Commission on Higher Education, anong tawag natin sa head, no? Tinatawag natin siyang chairperson, no? So, chairperson is more of gender-fair language, no? Not chairman. So, we will avoid saying chairman, although that is okay. However, if you want to be gender fair, we use chairperson. No? So chairperson, so is the current chairperson of Commission on Higher Education. We have Professor J. Prospero de Vera II. No? So si Popoy de Vera ang ating current chair ng Commission on Higher Education, chair or chairperson. So ano naman tawag natin sa head ng TESDA? That is Director General. Okay? Next question. The utilization of drills in the classroom is based on which of the following Thorndike's law? Okay? A. Exercise. B. Effect. C. Readiness. D. Belongingness. Utilization of drills. Okay? Pag utilization of drills, no? Kung magpa-powerful elimination tayo, siguro tanggalin na natin yung B and D. Pili tayo sa A or C. Okay? Okay. So, ano ang sagot? Future LPT. So, the answer here is, of course, law of exercise. So, pag sinasabi nating law of exercise, we are actually talking about practice, drills na ginagawa natin sa classroom. So, ano mga example ng mga exercises or drills na ginagawa natin sa classroom para ma-reach natin yung mastery ng mga estudyante? Spelling, for example. That can be a spelling drill is an example of this activity. What else? Of course, sure, math drills, the basic math drills kaya 'di ba usually during your elementary or even in high school meron tayong mga window cards no for multiplication, subtraction, addition. So at time ano yan no, time bound, no time constraint tayo sa pagsagot. Like for example, like 2 minutes, you have to be able to answer all uh the 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 drill, no? So, this part of our mastery. Okay? Yan ay sa Thorndike's law. And of course, we have the three, no, here, the law of effect, the law of exercise, the law of readiness. So, for law of effect, so emotional reaction, no, of the learner, so positive outcomes will actually bear repeated behavior. So, for example, if the student feel that he or she is being guided, for example, in your classroom, in your class, no, he will actually be motivated to really study smarter. Okay, so the tendency is that he will really take time to really read their lesson or his or her lesson because he feels that you are supportive of the learning process. No? So there is an emotional attachment or reaction of the learner. Uh, if you also give, for example, a very safe and secure, you give good praises, you give praises to those who excel a lot, that could also give no a long lasting effect to them. So the tendency or the implications that they will actually study better. Okay? For law of exercise, yun nga, no? Encourage repetition to acquire skills. Practice makes perfect. That's why teachers give drills, no? Give exercises para ma-master ng bata yung certain competency that we're trying to develop among them. And lastly, of course, is law of readiness. So physical, mental, emotional state of the learner. Cold room is can be a negative learning experience. So for example, no, masyadong malamig yung classroom, it will actually distract them. Hindi sila ready, no? For example, sinimulan mo yung klase mo kahit malamig yung classroom, hindi ganon mareretain yung concept sa kanila because they're not ready to learn. They have to really resolve the atmosphere. So, kailangan hinaan mo yung aircon, for example. Kabalintunaan, for example, kapag naman sobrang init ng classroom and then nagturo ka agad, hindi mo sila pinapansin, then that would result to low retention of concept or low conceptual retention. So kaya kailangan as a teacher, we have the with-itness, no? We know what is happening around our classroom. We have to have an eyes at the back, although that's not literal, meaning we are so sensitive of what's happening in our corners, in the four corners of our classroom or the four corners of of our virtual classroom if we're conducting online classes. Right? So that's it. So next question, a quiz is considered as what type of test? A, summative test, B, formative test, C, placement test, D, aptitude test. Okay, what is the answer? Teachers. So pag quiz yan ay, of course, example of a formative test. Remember, quiz is being done okay, during instruction, no? So, ibig sabihin, for example, after 1 hour class, okay, uh, after 1 hour class, you decide, no, to give them a short quiz, no, for example, a 10-item multiple choice quiz, no, to gauge what they have learned after 1 hour class. Then you are actually doing a formative evaluation, meaning you are assessing whether they learn from the lesson or not. So you do this, no, formative actually is being done before or during instruction. Okay? So, pag nakita sa board exam, please formative test. It's an example of a formative test or in other words, know what type of assessment how do we classify that as an assessment that is actually assessment for learning. So when you give a quiz, you are doing assessment for learning. So tatandaan, assessment for learning for formative. Formative, example ng formative quiz. Ano pang example ng formative assessment? Recitation. Now, when you give, for example, a question and the students answer you back, that's part of doing a formative assessment. Summative test is actually assessment of learning because summative test is being done after instruction. Okay, kung sa quiz is during instruction, summative test is actually being given after instruction. Usually for summative test, you have several lessons here. or 1/4 or 1 unit. So an example of a summative test is a unit test. For example, a long test with several topics or several lessons. Even quarterly exam can be considered as a summative test. And all of these are actually under assessment of learning. Okay? Placement test, binibigay ito, no, for example, to identify the grade placement kung saan natin pwedeng ilagay ang isang bata, what particular section, no, for example, in one grade level. So, for example, you have 10 grade levels or 10 sections in your school, and you want to identify whether saan pwedeng ilagay ang isang estudyante, no? So, you will give them placement test so that they can be distributed in the different sections in that particular grade level. So, that is actually placement test. So, what else? So, ginagamit din yung placement test, no, sa mga trabaho, no? For example, in what particular department, no, pwedeng ilagay yung applicant. So they actually give you a placement test. Okay? Then of course, aptitude test, usually to they measure specific skills. So for example, math aptitude test or science aptitude test, no, which actually measures a certain or core competency or core skill, which is probably needed in either a particular job or a particular uh for example a particular role, no, in an organization. Okay, so this is part of our assessment of learning. Okay, so gaya ng sinabi ko sa inyo, nabanggit ko kanina yung dalawa, no, assessment of and assessment for. Meron pa tayong ikatlo, yung assessment as learning. So try natin isa-isahin i-differentiate ulit to, no? So pag sinabing assessment of learning, summative and performance-based siya. So in the context of DepEd, ang assessment of learning is quarterly exam, no? Quarterly exam, then performance task, then yung inyong mga written works, no? So this can actually be part of your assessment of learning. Although doon sa assessment for learning, which is formative, yan yung mga quiz, no, na binibigay, and even yung mga interactive questions during your discussion. Then assessment as learning, usually ito self-reflection, self-examination, self-paced monitoring, no, of one's own progress. So sa teacher, no, pag assessment as learning, if teachers, for example, attend, no, seminars, no, for example, to enhance their skill, no, and learn from it, then that could also be part of our assessment as learning. So we also assess our skills by making sure that we do self-development, professional development activities for ourselves. Okay. So for assessment of learning, we assess assessment judges results, no, against established standards and benchmarks. That's why we have here rubrics, no, for performance tasks, no, and even scoring rubric for your summative test. So the most traditional use of assessment can reveal how the learner and the system are performing over time. Okay? So pag assessment of learning, um, ano na ulit yan, quarterly exam, ano pa, performance tasks, written works, no? Use this way naman for assessment for learning provides immediate feedback. That's why it's being done during and before, no? So type of assessment for learning can be diagnostic exams, formative tests, gaya ng inyong mga quizzes, and then your interactive questions during your class discussion. So, ano bang pinagkaiba nga lang nung diagnostic test sa formative test? Well, for the diagnostic test, usually ito, before the lesson, you try to gauge, no, ano yung alam ng bata. So, example of a diagnostic test, of course, your pre-test, no? And then yung kasama lagi nun yung achievement test ninyo or your post-test. Your post-test or achievement test can actually be considered as assessment of learning, but your pre-test or diagnostic test is under assessment for learning. Okay? So you provide immediate feedback both to the learner and to the adults on developing knowledge, skills, and disposition while learning is actually happening. Okay? So for adult, pag nakita nyo, no, sa board exam, adult learning or adult education, that is considered to be um as andragogy. So pag nakita andragogy, that is adult learning or adult teaching or adult education. Pedagogy, of course, our art and science of teaching. Okay? So assessment as learning used this way, assessment supports the development of metacognition. So you're trying to be very reflective here. Students are so reflective. They assess themselves whether they are learning or not yet. So they can proceed to the next module if they see um, within themselves that they have learned or they have mastered the previous module. So, nangyari ito, no, usually nagkaroon tayo ng modular-based instruction during the COVID-19 educational disruption, mas naging self-directed yung learner and nagkakaroon sila ng independent learning, and this is part of their assessment as learning because they self-examine themselves whether they're learning or not. So, how learners learn and who the learners know themselves to be, this use of assessment provides a kind of self-awareness needed to become a better learner and to develop high-order skills and disposition. Okay? Sige nga, okay, sige, mag-drill lang tayo ng saglit. No, sasabihin niyo sa akin if it's assessment of learning, assessment for learning, or assessment as learning. Okay, quiz. Okay, so that is assessment for learning, pre-test. Okay, that is assessment for learning. Quarterly exam, assessment of learning. Unit test, assessment of learning. Self-assessment checklist, assessment as learning. Okay? Performance task, assessment of learning. Written works, assessment of learning. Formative test, assessment for learning. So, ganun, no? So, ito kasi is kadalasang tinatanong sa board exam. So, pag nakita nyo yung mga keywords na sinabi ko, madali nyo na makikita, masasagutan to, whether it's an assessment of learning, assessment for learning, or assessment as learning. Okay? Next question. What is a compilation of pieces of evidence of an individual's skills, ideas, interests, progress, and accomplishments? A. Projects, B. Folders, C. Portfolio, D. Scrapbook. Compilation of pieces of evidences. The answer here is portfolio. So pag nakita sa board exam, compilation of pieces of evidences, which actually deals with student skills, ideas, interests, progress, and accomplishments, that is portfolio. And of course, because of the flexible learning, no, the online learning that we have, nagkaroon na rin tayo ng mga e-portfolios, electronic portfolios, or tinatawag nating mga digital portfolios. Some of the types of these portfolios are the following. First is showcase portfolio, no? So pag nakita sa board exam, what is a showcase portfolio? It's a collection of best work of students, also called presentation, formal, professional, or career portfolio. No? So usually, sa career portfolio, you actually showcase, no, the highlights of your career, di ba? Or professional portfolio where you actually include the best works that you did so that you will actually entice or encourage the employer to hire you, no? So written after learning takes place and may involve student choice. Usually, yung mga best work ng mga estudyante natin, so for example, yung mga best essays nila are being showcased in that particular portfolio that can be considered as showcase portfolio. Process portfolio is a work in progress, also called learning development portfolio, reflection portfolio, or formative portfolio, where students actually show the work in progress, no? How did they come up, for example, in a certain output? So nakikita natin yung process here. So written as the learning is happening with a focus on reflections. Nagkakaroon sila ng mga reflections, reflective journals to see whether they're learning in the process. So what's more important here, what is being highlighted here, is the process of learning that they are encountering or going through. While assessment portfolio is often more formal and less student-centered than a showcase or process portfolio, documents learning in line with curriculum objectives. You usually binabase yung mga portfolio doon sa set outcome or set target or objective na binigay ni teacher. And then yun yung gagawin ng estudyante. For example, you will be able, for example, to write an effective exploratory essay. And then, ayun, i-assess ni teacher yung nasa portfolio mo base dun sa mga target or sa objective na sinet. Okay? While hybrid is a combination of the showcase, process, and or assessment portfolio, and artifacts may be moved from a process portfolio into an assessment or showcase portfolio. Again, we have the three major here: showcase portfolio, process portfolio, and assessment portfolio. Okay? Next. Ayan na yun. So, what is a compilation? Siyempre, alam na natin yan. That is portfolio. So, naulit lang. So, next question. Teacher then has not to wait for the end of the term to find out how much students learn. With which does teacher then agree? A. Authentic evaluation. B. Formative evaluation. C. Norm reference evaluation. Or letter D. Summative evaluation. Okay, gaya ng sanabi ko sa inyo, hindi mo kailangan no, at the end of the instruction or the end of the unit or a quarter. You can always do your assessment. And this is part of our formative evaluation. Formative evaluation happens before or during instruction. Okay, authentic evaluation, on the other hand, is that when you actually give your students authentic tasks, no, real world tasks, where they can actually connect it to the real world situation or real life scenario, that could be an authentic evaluation. No? When you give authentic tasks, assessment tasks which are authentic. Norm reference evaluation is when you compare, for example, a performance of a student against others. No? So usually for norm reference evaluation, nakakaroon tayo ng mga percentiles. So for example, that particular student is in the 95% percentile, meaning he is better than the 95% of the class, or he or she is better than the 95% of the class. Okay? Well, summative evaluation would mean you actually do it after the unit or after the quarter. So summative evaluation is assessment of learning. Formative evaluation is assessment for learning. Assessment for learning, formative evaluation, assessment of learning, summative evaluation. Okay? Ayan. So we have two kasi in DepEd, no? This is the two types of classroom assessment in the Department of Education, no? Under Department Order Number 5 Series of 2017, the Bible of Assessment in DepEd. So when we say classroom assessment, is a process of gathering evidence of what a learner knows, what a learner understands, and what a learner is able to do. So this kind of assessment, the formative assessment, is an ongoing process during instruction that helps teachers adjust their teaching style through reviews and observation. So if they see na, hindi pa ganun na mamaster ng estudyante ko yung mga chemical elements, okay? I will need more day, no? For example, another learning session for them to master it. Or I will give a supplemental activity for them to be able to master it. It also helps learners reflect on their own progress. Okay? For summative assessment, this is used to measure whether learners have met the content and performance standards. So these measures are recorded and used to report on the learner's achievements. Examples of summative assessment in DepEd are, of course, your quarterly exam, written works, and performance tasks. These are the three major sources of assessment in the Department of Education. So pag tinanong sa board exam, performance tasks, written works, and quarterly assessment. Okay? Next, schools should teach students to make responsible choices and be made accountable for such choices. A. Existentialism. B. Progressivism. C. Perennialism. D. Reconstructionism. Okay, what is the answer? Teachers. Of course, that is existentialism. So pag nakita niyo responsible choices, personal responsibility, accountable for such choices, you are actually talking about existentialism. No? When student has a choice. No? Kaya ang mga implication ng existentialism sa curriculum is that students can actually choose uh, their subjects, for example. Especially in college, di ba, we have electives. So this is actually inspired by existentialist philosophy where students can actually select what particular electives ang gusto nilang kukunin. Ano pa? Sa senior high school, may existentialism doon because students will be able to choose what particular track they will actually go to, whether in academic, in TVL, arts and design, and sports. Remember, we have 4 tracks in senior high school: academic, TVL, sports and design, sports and arts and design. So, 4 yon, no? Under academic, may mga several strands yan, no? So, pwede rin pumili yung mga bata whether they go to the, for example, sa academic track, whether they go to ABM, to UMS, to STEM, or to GAS. No? So, but that's part of our existentialism. Progressivism has something to do with considering the interests of the learners. So usually, you do collaborative activity, you group them according to their interest is part of progressivism. Perennialism has something to do with the unchanging truth, no? So usually application nito is that teachers teach history, teachers teach literature, teachers teach humanities because they believe that even though these are old age already or haven't been in existence for so long, you still can learn from them. Okay? Kaya nga we still have to learn history, 'di ba? Kailangan pa rin nating aralin ang kasaysayan. Gaya ng sabi ni Historian Ambet Ocampo, ang kasaysayan ay pagsasalaysay ng mga salaysay na may saysay. Okay? So we get meaning from it. So we still this still meaningful even until today, even it's, you know, kind of old, but it's part of our, you know, philosophies of perennialism. And of course, Reconstructionism has something to do with the social order. We want to see social order. If there's a social problem, we have to address that. And the implications of this in the classroom or in the education setting is that students are tasked to go outside to do community work, community outreach, so that it could address problems in the society. That's part of social reconstructionism. This is anchored on our SDGs, no? What are SDGs? Sustainable Development Goals. So, pag tinanong sa board exam, ilan ang SDGs natin? We have 17 SDGs. And number one is to end poverty. No poverty. First SDG. And the most relevant to our profession as teachers is SDG 4, to achieve quality education. Okay? So sabi nga dito, no, in this quote, you are free to make your own choices, but you are not free from the consequence of those choices. So you have to make the smart choice that you have to make, no? So and I'm happy actually because you're choosing to watch this video. That's a choice, no? This is because you choose to prepare yourself for the upcoming board exam. And I am praying, no? My prayers are the same with your prayers. You'll be able to nail it, to ace the board exam. Okay? So for the picture smart, the most effective learning activities are blank. A, visual imaginations. B, reflections. C, discussions. D, manipulatives. Okay, what is the answer? Picture of course, pag sinabing picture smart, that is visual imaginations, no? So, pag picture smart, more visuals, imageries, ayan. Reflections, more of, ano to, mga, it could be, interpersonal or existential, no? Usually for, existentialism, the choice, no? Or the personal responsibility. Discussions, more of like auditory, if you want to hear, for example, discussions, ayan. Manipulative is more of tactile, no? Tactile intelligence. Okay? Ayan. So we have here the different, no? The 8 major intelligence, no? Proposed by Howard Gardner, and he actually added one. He actually proposed the 9th intelligence, which is of course existential intelligence, or we call it as people ano no existential intelligence, or what we call it's more of like parang more of reflective, no, more of personal choices, personal responsibilities. Okay, so here we have here several, no, the bodily kinesthetic, body smart, interpersonal, people smart, and we get to talk to other people. That's interpersonal intelligence. Verbal linguistic, word smart, you're good in writing, for example, you're good in speaking. Logical, mathematical, you're logic smart. Naturalistic, you're nature smart, just like me. For example, you really love plants, now you're a plantita or plantita, or you want to go to nature trippings, now you want to commune with nature. Ayun. Then self smart is intrapersonal, no? So you get to understand better yourself. Ayan, may mga self-reflections, reflective ka, no? You get to learn from your own experiences and you reflect on these own experiences. Kaya nga, lagi kong sinasabi nila, 'di ba, experience is the best teacher. Pero kung titignan natin, if na-experience mo lang at hindi ka nag-reflect about this experience, wala ka namang matututunan. So better, reflected experience is the best teacher. When you reflect about that particular experience and you learn from it, hindi mo na gagawin yun ulit because you either hurt, or you either failed, and then you are actually learning. So better if we say reflected experience is the best teacher. Then picture smart yon, visual, spatial, and then music smart, musical. So these are the 8 plus the existential intelligence as part of the multiple intelligence of forward guard. Okay? Next, which can run counter to the encouragement you give to your students to ask questions. A, knitted eyebrows when a question is raised. B, eye-to-eye contact. C, radiant face. D, an encouraging hand gesture. So pag nakita is run counter, ibig sabihin kabaligtaran, no? Which opposes, no? To the encouragement. Ibig sabihin, tinitignan dito yung hindi, yung naiiba. Okay? So eye-to-eye contact is good. Radiant face is good. Encouraging hand gesture is good. So these are all positive. So pipiliin natin yung negative, which is knitted eyebrows when a question is raised, di ba? Paano mo ma-encourage yung mga estudyante mo magtanong kapag nakaganyan ka? Di ba? So, kailangan you have your radiant face so that the students will be able to feel that the classroom is secure, the classroom is safe for them to share and for them to be able to formulate their questions. And, di ba? For example, you're an English teacher and you're teaching this pronouns, di ba? Okay? There, di ba? Naka-knitted eyebrow. How can the student ask question? They will not, because they will feel threatened. And so they will just, be passive and just listen to you. Okay? All right, that ends our Prof Ed. 10 questions have been answered again and have been rationalized. I hope you learned something from our today's episode. Before I leave, and before I end this, I would like you to be reminded that what you do is what you will get. If you do, with effort, your let review, if you give time to your review, you will reap these effort soonest possible time. So if you do good in your review, you will do good also in your board examination, and that will give you your license for professional teacher, and your addendum to your and the addendum to your name LPT will actually be issued. So patuloy lang tayo na maghanda, magsagot, magbasa ng mga most common concepts, the most common concepts na tinatanong sa board exam, and then try to practice using drills. Maraming drills that you can see online and you can see from different materials. So try ninyo to so that pag nakita niyo to sa board exam, madali na lang. And hopefully samahan ninyo na naman ako sa mga susunod nating episodes. So I hope you are already subscribed to our channel para you'll get notified sa ating mga next video. So maraming salamat sa inyo. Again, happy reviewing and thank you for joining me in our today's review session. Salamat!